In a small, peaceful kingdom surrounded by lush green hills and thick forests, life flowed at a slow and steady rhythm. The people lived simple lives, tending to their farms, running little shops, or working in the castle. The king, though wise and just, was often seen as distant. He spent most of his time inside the grand palace, dealing with matters of state, signing documents, and meeting nobles. His presence was rarely felt among the common folk, except during festivals or ceremonies when he would appear briefly before retreating back into his royal duties. The king's guards were no less mysterious. Clad in shining armor that reflected the sunlight, they stood tall and proud, symbols of strength and order. They marched through the streets with precision, their boots clicking against the cobblestones. To the villagers, the guards seemed almost untouchable, figures of authority who existed to protect the kingdom, but rarely interacted with ordinary people beyond formalities. Among these guards was Captain Alden, a man known for his loyalty, discipline, and unwavering sense of duty. For years, he had served the crown faithfully, earning respect from both his fellow soldiers and the townsfolk. But despite his achievements, Alden couldn't shake off a strange feeling of emptiness. Day after day, he followed orders, patrolled the borders, and ensured the safety of the realm. Yet, something about his rigid routine left him longing for more. He wondered if there was more to being a guard than simply enforcing rules and maintaining order. Was there a way to truly connect with the people he swore to protect? One crisp autumn morning, as golden leaves swirled in the breeze, Alden found himself patrolling near the outskirts of the capital city. His route took him across an old stone bridge that spanned a sparkling river. As he approached, he heard faint sounds of laughter drifting through the air. Curious, he paused and looked down toward the riverbank. There, he saw a group of children playing happily, their faces glowing with innocence and joy. Some were skipping stones across the water, while others chased each other around, their giggles ringing out like music. Alden watched them silently, leaning against the railing of the bridge. Despite their cheerful demeanor, he couldn't help but notice the worn-out state of their clothes. Their shirts were patched up, their pants torn at the knees, and their shoes barely held together with bits of string. It was clear that these children came from humble backgrounds, yet they radiated happiness, finding joy even in the simplest things: a smooth pebble, a cool breeze, or the company of friends. As Alden observed them, one boy caught his attention. He was smaller than the rest, with messy hair and a mischievous grin. The boy carried a wooden stick, pretending it was a sword, and led the others in an imaginary battle. Even from afar, Alden could see the spark of imagination and courage in the child's eyes. Something about the scene stirred a memory deep within him, a reminder of his own childhood, when life had been simpler and dreams had seemed limitless. For a moment, Alden forgot about his patrol. He stayed there, watching the children play, feeling a warmth spread through his chest. These kids, despite having so little, possessed a kind of wealth money couldn't buy: the ability to find joy in the smallest moments. But as much as their laughter touched him, it also made him wonder, what kind of future awaited them? Would they have the opportunities they deserved, or would their potential go unnoticed, buried under the weight of poverty? Little did Alden know, this chance encounter would soon lead him down a path he never expected, one that would challenge everything he thought he knew about duty, kindness, and what it truly meant to serve. The following morning, as the first rays of sunlight painted the sky in hues of orange and pink, Captain Alden found himself drawn back to the old stone bridge. Something about those children had lingered in his mind all night, their laughter echoing in his thoughts like a melody he couldn't forget. He told himself it was just curiosity, that he wanted to see if they would return to play again. But deep down, he knew there was more to it. Perhaps it was the way their eyes sparkled with hope despite their hardships, or maybe it was the realization that he hadn't felt such warmth in years. As he approached the bridge, sure enough, the children were already there. They were engrossed in their games, oblivious to his presence at first. The boy with the wooden stick, whom Alden now noticed was slightly shorter than the others, was leading another round of pretend battles, shouting commands to his troops with surprising authority for someone so young. One of the girls knelt by the riverbank, carefully arranging smooth stones into patterns, while two others chased each other around, their giggles filling the crisp morning air. This time, however, one of the children spotted him. It was the same scrappy boy Alden had noticed the day before. The boy stopped mid-swing of his makeshift sword and stared at Alden with wide, curious eyes. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then, slowly, the boy stepped forward, clutching his stick tightly, as though it might protect him from this towering figure in shining armor. "Are you really a king's guard?" the boy asked finally, his voice tinged with both awe and skepticism. His question drew the attention of the other children, who turned to look at Alden with equal parts fascination and caution. Alden hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to respond. He wasn't used to speaking casually with children, or anyone outside the palace walls, for that matter, but something about the boy's earnest expression softened him. Kneeling down so he wouldn't appear too intimidating, Alden nodded. "Yes, I am," he replied gently. "My name is Captain Alden." The boy's face lit up instantly. "Wow, a real king's guard," he exclaimed, turning to his friends with a triumphant grin. "I told you he was one." Before Alden could say anything else, the boy stepped closer, his earlier shyness replaced by bold curiosity. "What do you do? Do you fight dragons, or catch bad guys?" Alden chuckled softly, surprised by the boy's imagination. "Not exactly," he said. "Mostly, I make sure the kingdom stays safe. That means protecting people like you and your friends." The boy tilted his head thoughtfully, as if trying to process this information. Then, after a pause, he asked, "Do you know King Alaric? Is he as brave as everyone says?" At the mention of the king, Alden straightened slightly, his tone becoming more formal. "King Alaric is very wise and cares deeply for the kingdom," he said, but even as the words left his mouth, Alden felt a pang of doubt. Did the king truly understand the lives of ordinary people, the struggles of families living hand-to-mouth, the dreams of children like these? Sensing Alden's hesitation, the boy pressed on. "Why are you here, Captain? Are we in danger?" No, Alden reassured him quickly. "I'm just passing through." He paused, glancing at the group of children. "What are your names?" "I'm Leo," the boy said proudly, puffing out his chest. Pointing to the girl arranging stones, he added, "That's Mira. And over there," he gestured toward the two laughing girls, "Erlila and Nea." "It's nice to meet all of you," Alden said, offering a small smile. "Where do you go to school?" At this, Leo's cheerful demeanor faltered slightly. "We go to Miss Ilara's school," he said, his voice quieter now. "But it's not much of a school. We don't have enough books, and some of us have to share desks because there aren't enough." Alden frowned, taken aback by the boy's honesty. "Doesn't the kingdom provide supplies for schools?" Leo shrugged. "Miss Ilara tries her best. She says learning can change our lives." But his voice trailed off, and he kicked at a pebble on the ground. "It's hard when we don't have what we need." The simplicity of the boy's words struck Alden like a hammer. These children weren't asking for riches or grandeur. They simply wanted the tools to learn, to dream, to build better futures for themselves. Yet, here they were, struggling with the basics while the palace overflowed with luxury. For a long moment, Alden didn't speak. He looked at the children, their faces filled with a mix of innocence and quiet determination. Finally, he stood up, placing a reassuring hand on Leo's shoulder. "Thank you for telling me," he said sincerely. "I'll come back soon. All right." Leo's eyes widened. "You will?" Alden nodded. "Yes, and maybe next time I'll bring something special for all of you." With that promise hanging in the air, Alden turned and walked away, his mind racing. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, and painted the sky in his shades of deep purple and gold, Captain Alden returned to the palace. The halls were quiet, save for the occasional echo of footsteps from servants or guards on duty. Normally, this was a time when Alden would review patrol schedules, sharpen his sword, or retire to his quarters for some much-needed rest. But tonight, his mind was elsewhere, occupied by thoughts of Leo, Mira, Leela, Nia, and the other children he had met earlier that day. Their faces lingered in his thoughts, their laughter still ringing faintly in his ears. He couldn't shake the image of Leo's hopeful eyes, or the way Mira carefully arranged stones by the riverbank, her focus unbroken despite the lack of proper toys. These children weren't asking for riches or grand gestures. They simply wanted a chance to learn, to grow, to dream beyond the confines of their circumstances. And yet, here they were, struggling with broken desks and shared books, while the palace overflowed with unused supplies. Alden paced back and forth in his room, his polished boots clicking softly against the stone floor. What could he do? The kingdom's treasury was strained, and requests for aid often went unanswered. Even if he brought the matter to the king, it might take weeks or even months for anything to change. By then, winter would arrive, bringing harsh winds and snow that would make life even harder for the villagers. No, waiting wasn't an option. Something had to be done now. Then it hit him, a memory from years ago, when he first joined the royal guard. There was a storage room in the palace, tucked away in a forgotten corner of the West Wing. It was filled with items no longer used: old wooden tables, stacks of parchment, quills, ink bottles, and other odds and ends. At the time, he had thought little of it, dismissing the clutter as relics of the past. But now, those very items seemed like treasures waiting to be rediscovered. Without wasting another moment, Alden grabbed a lantern and made his way to the storage room. The door creaked open with a groan, revealing shelves lined with dusty objects. Cobwebs clung to the corners, and the air smelled faintly of mildew. But beneath the layers of neglect, Alden found exactly what he was looking for: wooden tables that could easily serve as desks, bundles of parchment perfect for writing lessons, and jars of ink that had barely been touched. There were even a few sturdy stools and blankets that could keep the children warm during colder days. As Alden began gathering the items, his heart raced with a mix of excitement and nervousness. This wasn't just bending the rules, it was outright breaking them. If anyone discovered what he was doing, there would be consequences. Yet, as he loaded the supplies onto a cart, he reminded himself why he was taking this risk. These children deserved better. They deserved a chance to rise above their hardships, and if no one else was willing to step up, then it fell to him. By the time he finished loading the cart, sweat dripped down his brow, and his arms ached from lifting heavy furniture. But the sight of the fully packed cart filled him with a strange sense of satisfaction, a feeling he hadn't experienced in years. For once, he wasn't just following orders. He was doing something meaningful, something that mattered. Wordlessly, Alden pushed the cart toward the stables, where he hitched it to a horse. As he worked, a few of his fellow guards noticed his unusual activity. One of them, a younger recruit named Finn, approached cautiously. "Captain, what's all this?" he asked, eyeing the cart curiously. "It's nothing you need to worry about," Alden replied firmly, though not unkindly. "Just a personal errand." Finn raised an eyebrow, but didn't press further. Instead, he offered a small nod before walking away, leaving Alden alone with his thoughts. Though the young guard said nothing, Alden knew the questions wouldn't stop there. News of his actions would spread eventually, and he would have to face the consequences. But for now, none of that mattered. All that mattered was getting these supplies to the children who needed them most. Under the cover of darkness, Alden set off toward the village school, his heart pounding with anticipation. He didn't know how the children, or Missy Laura, would react to his unexpected arrival. But one thing was certain: he was determined to make a difference, no matter the cost. The early morning mist clung to the ground as Captain Alden guided the cart along the narrow dirt path leading to the village school. The rhythmic creak of the wooden wheels and the soft clip-clop of the horses' hooves were the only sounds breaking the stillness of dawn. Alden's heart thudded in his chest, not from exertion but from a mix of excitement and apprehension. He had spent hours preparing for this moment, yet now that it was here, he couldn't help but wonder how his gesture would be received. Would Miss Elara understand? Would the children see this as the act of kindness he intended it to be? As the schoolhouse came into view, its weathered walls stood out against the pale light of the rising sun. It was a modest building, with chipped paint on the door and cracks running through the stone foundation. Despite its worn appearance, there was a certain charm to it, a quiet resilience that mirrored the spirit of the people who used it every day. Alden pulled the cart to a stop just outside the gate and stepped down, his boots crunching softly on the gravel. Before he could knock on the door, it swung open, revealing Miss Elara. She was younger than Alden had expected, with warm brown eyes and hair tied neatly into a bun. Her simple dress spoke of practicality rather than luxury, and her hands bore faint smudges of ink, evidence of countless lessons taught with care. When she saw Alden standing there in his gleaming armor, her expression shifted from surprise to curiosity. "Captain Alden," she asked, her voice tinged with both wonder and caution. "What brings you here so early?" Alden hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to begin. Then, stepping aside, he gestured toward the cart behind him. "I brought something for your students," he said simply, his tone steady but kind. Miss Elara's gaze followed his gesture, and her eyes widened as she took in the contents of the cart. There were sturdy wooden tables that could serve as desks, stacks of pristine parchment, jars of ink, quills, and even a few blankets folded neatly at the top. For a moment, she stood frozen, her mouth slightly agape. Then, tears welled up in her eyes, glistening in the soft morning light. "Captain," she began, her voice trembling. This is incredible. I don't know what to say." "There's no need to thank me," Alden replied quickly, feeling a flush of embarrassment creep onto his face. "I only did what seemed right." Word of his arrival spread like wildfire among the children. Within moments, curious faces peered around the corners of the schoolhouse, their eyes wide with disbelief. Leo was the first to run out, his scrappy energy undiminished by the early hour. "Captain Alden," he shouted, skidding to a halt beside Miss Elara. "You came back." "I told you I would," Alden said with a small smile, ruffling the boy's messy hair. "And I always keep my promises." The other children soon joined them, gathering around the cart with awe-struck expressions. Mira ran her fingers over the smooth surface of one of the wooden tables, while Leela and Nia marveled at the stacks of parchment. Even the quieter ones, who usually kept to themselves, couldn't resist touching the supplies, their faces lighting up with joy. "This is amazing," Miss Elara murmured, wiping away a tear. "We've never had anything like this before. These desks will make such a difference. And the parchment. Oh, the children will finally have enough paper to practice their writing without worrying about wasting it." Alden nodded, watching as the children explored the cart with uncontainable excitement. "I hope it helps," he said sincerely. "They deserve every opportunity to learn and grow." Miss Elara turned to him, her gratitude evident in her eyes. "You have no idea how much this means to us, to me, to the children. Thank you doesn't feel like enough." "You don't need to thank me," Alden repeated, though his cheeks reddened slightly under her praise. "Just promise me one thing. Keep teaching them. Keep inspiring them. That's all the thanks I need." As the sun climbed higher in the sky, casting golden rays over the scene, Alden felt a warmth in his chest that he hadn't experienced in years. Watching the children laugh and chatter as they helped unload the cart, he realized that this was what true service meant. Not enforcing rules or standing guard, but making a tangible difference in the lives of others. And in that moment, he knew he had done the right thing. no matter the consequences. News of Captain Alden's unexpected generosity spread quickly through the village, like ripples in a pond after a stone is thrown. By mid-morning, whispers about the king's guard and his mysterious delivery had reached every corner of the community. Villagers who passed by the school stopped to catch a glimpse of the new desks and supplies, shaking their heads in disbelief. "Did you hear? One of the king's own guards brought all this for the children." They murmured to one another, their voices filled with admiration. Miss Elara, overwhelmed by gratitude, couldn't stop thanking Alden, even as she tried to focus on organizing the supplies. The children, meanwhile, were beside themselves with excitement. They eagerly helped arrange the wooden tables inside the classroom, giggling and chattering as they imagined sitting at their very own desks. For many of them, it was the first time they'd ever had something so sturdy and reliable, a symbol that someone believed in their potential. But the impact of Alden's actions didn't end there. Inspired by his kindness, others in the village began stepping forward to contribute in their own ways. A group of local carpenters, moved by the sight of the old schoolhouse's broken windows and sagging roof, offered to repair them free of charge. "If a king's guard can take time to help these kids, surely we can do our part too," one of them said with a grin, rolling up his sleeves. Farmers from nearby fields donated baskets of fresh produce, apples, carrots, and loaves of bread, to ensure the children had enough to eat during their long school days. Merchants pitched in as well, bringing warm blankets and coats to protect the students from the approaching winter chill. Even the elderly seamstress, known for her skill with needle and thread, stitched together colorful curtains to brighten up the dreary classroom. The transformation was remarkable. What had once been a crumbling, underfunded schoolhouse now buzzed with life and hope. Miss Elara watched it all unfold with tears in her eyes, knowing that none of it would have happened without Alden's selfless act. Determined to express her gratitude, she sat down that evening to write a letter to the king himself. In it, she described how a single act of kindness had sparked a wave of generosity throughout the village. She spoke of the children's renewed enthusiasm for learning and the sense of unity that had blossomed among the villagers. Yet, true to Alden's wishes, she never mentioned his name, referring to him only as a guardian angel in armor. Days turned into weeks, and the ripple effect continued to grow. Parents who had once doubted the value of education began encouraging their children to attend school regularly, seeing firsthand the effort being poured into their futures. Older siblings, inspired by the younger one's excitement, started asking Miss Elara if they could join the lessons too. The schoolhouse, once quiet and overlooked, became the heart of the village, a place where dreams took root and flourished. For Alden, however, life returned to its usual rhythm. He resumed his patrols, standing tall and stoic as always, though his thoughts often drifted back to the children and their smiling faces. He wondered if anyone had connected the dots between the mysterious donation and him, but no one approached him directly. His fellow guards occasionally teased him about his late-night errands, but Alden brushed it off with a nonchalant shrug, refusing to give anything away. Little did he know, his secret wouldn't remain hidden for long. Unbeknownst to him, the king had received Miss Elara's heartfelt letter and was deeply intrigued. Advisors were dispatched to investigate the claims, interviewing villagers and piecing together the story. It wasn't long before the truth came out. The man behind the act of kindness was none other than Captain Alden, one of the most trusted members of the royal guard. When Alden was summoned to the palace, his stomach churned with anxiety. Had he overstepped his bounds? Would the king see his actions as defiance rather than compassion? As he stood before the throne, head bowed in respect, he braced himself for whatever judgment awaited him. But instead of anger or reprimand, the king surprised everyone, including Alden, with his response. "Captain Alden," the king began, his voice calm yet commanding, "you've reminded me of why we serve, not just to enforce laws, but to uplift those in need. Your actions have brought honor not only to yourself but to the entire kingdom." Alden looked up, stunned. Before he could respond, the king added, I wish to see this school for myself. Prepare my carriage. We leave at dawn." As the news sank in, Alden felt a mix of relief and pride. His small act of kindness had ignited something far greater than he ever imagined, proving that even the simplest gestures could create waves of change. And as he prepared to escort the king to the next morning, as the first rays of sunlight peeked over the horizon, a grand royal carriage rolled into the village. Drawn by 4 magnificent horses adorned with golden harnesses, it was an unusual sight in this humble community. Villagers paused their daily chores to watch in awe as the king himself stepped out, accompanied by Captain Alden and a small entourage of advisors. The air buzzed with excitement and curiosity. Few had ever seen the monarch up close, let alone expected him to visit such a modest schoolhouse. Miss Ilara waited nervously outside the school, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. She wore her best dress, though it was still simple compared to the rich fabrics of the king's robes. Beside her stood Leo and a few other children, their eyes wide with wonder as they stared at the towering figure before them. For a moment, no one spoke. The weight of the occasion hung heavy in the crisp morning air. "Miss Ilara," the king said finally, his voice warm but authoritative, "I've heard much about your dedication to these children. Thank you for welcoming me today." Miss Ilara curtsied deeply, her cheeks flushed. "Your Majesty, it is an honor beyond words. Please come inside. I'd be delighted to show you what we've accomplished." As the group entered the classroom, the transformation was impossible to miss. The once dilapidated space now gleamed with care and effort. The new wooden desks were neatly arranged, each topped with stacks of parchment and freshly sharpened quills. Colorful curtains framed the windows, letting in streams of golden light that illuminated the room. On one wall, a chalkboard displayed lessons written in careful handwriting, while drawings made by the children decorated another. It was clear that love and hard work had gone into every detail. The king walked slowly around the room, taking it all in. He ran his fingers over the smooth surface of a desk, inspected the rows of books on a makeshift shelf, and paused to examine a painting of a flower done by Mira. "This is remarkable," he murmured, more to himself than anyone else. Turning to Miss Ilara, he asked, "How many students do you teach?" 24, Your Majesty," she replied proudly. "And every day, more parents are bringing their children to enroll. They see how much has changed here, and they want their sons and daughters to have the same opportunities." The king nodded thoughtfully. Then, without warning, he did something unexpected. He lowered himself onto the floor, sitting cross-legged among the children. The villagers gasped softly at the sight. Their king, dressed in regal attire, sitting humbly on the cold stone floor. But the children didn't hesitate. They gathered around him eagerly, their earlier shyness melting away as they realized he wasn't so different from them after all. Miss Ilara began teaching a short lesson, explaining basic arithmetic using pebbles and sticks. The king listened intently, occasionally asking questions or offering encouragement. When Leo raised his hand to answer a problem, the king smiled warmly and praised him. "Very good, young man. You'll make a fine scholar one day." By the time the lesson ended, the atmosphere in the room had shifted entirely. The villagers who had crowded near the doorway to catch a glimpse of the king now felt a newfound connection to him. He wasn't just a distant ruler anymore. He was someone who cared enough to sit among them, to listen, and to understand. Before leaving, the king addressed the gathered crowd. "This school is a testament to what can be achieved when people come together for a greater purpose," he said, his voice ringing with conviction. "But it should not stop here. Every child in my kingdom deserves the chance to learn, to grow, and to dream. From this day forward, I pledge to fund the construction of new schools across our land, ensuring that no child is left behind." A cheer erupted from the villagers, their faces glowing with gratitude and hope. As the king climbed back into his carriage, he turned to Alden and placed a firm hand on his shoulder. You've reminded me of the true meaning of leadership, Captain. For that, I am grateful." With those words, the carriage departed, leaving behind a village forever changed, and a king inspired to lead with both strength and compassion. In the weeks and months that followed the king's visit, the village school became a symbol of hope not just for its own community, but for the entire kingdom. The king kept his promise, and soon, plans were underway to build new schools in every corner of the realm. Architects and builders traveled from town to town, constructing sturdy, well-equipped classrooms where children could learn without worrying about broken desks or missing supplies. Teachers like Miss Ilara were given proper training and support, ensuring they had the tools they needed to inspire the next generation. But the changes didn't stop there. Inspired by the unity he had witnessed during his visit, the king introduced reforms aimed at improving life for all his subjects. He ordered the repair of crumbling roads that connected remote villages to larger towns, making it easier for farmers to transport their goods to market. He also established programs to provide food and clothing to families struggling through harsh winters. It was as if the spark of kindness Alden had ignited had grown into a flame that illuminated the entire kingdom. For Alden, life took on a new rhythm. The king publicly praised him for his role in transforming the village school, promoting him to head of the royal guard, a position of great responsibility and respect. Yet, despite his elevated rank, Alden remained humble. He continued his patrols, often stopping by the village school to check on the children. Each time he visited, he was greeted with hugs and laughter, the kind of warmth that no amount of gold or glory could ever match. The children, too, flourished under the newfound attention and resources. Leo, once a scrappy boy with a wooden stick, began showing an aptitude for strategy and leadership, traits that reminded everyone of Alden himself. Mira's artistic talents blossomed, and her paintings started appearing in local fairs, earning praise from visitors far and wide. Lila and Nia excelled in reading and writing, devouring books as if each page held a secret to a better future. Even the quieter students found their voices, encouraged by Miss Ilara's unwavering belief in their potential. Years passed, and the impact of Alden's actions rippled outward in ways no one could have predicted. Some of the children grew up to become teachers themselves, inspired by Miss Ilara's dedication. Others pursued careers as doctors, engineers, and leaders, using the education they received to improve their communities. Whenever they spoke of their childhoods, they always mentioned Captain Alden, the man who had believed in them when so many others hadn't. Miss Ilara, now older but still full of energy, often reflected on how different things might have been without Alden's intervention. He didn't just bring us desks and books, she would say to anyone who asked. He brought us hope, and sometimes hope is the most powerful gift of all. As for Alden, he never sought recognition for what he had done. To him, it wasn't about fame or accolades, it was about doing what was right. On quiet evenings, as he stood watch over the kingdom, he would think back to that first morning by the old stone bridge, when a group of children's laughter had changed everything. He realized then that true strength wasn't measured by the weight of armor or the sharpness of a sword. It was measured by the ability to lift others up, even when it required stepping outside the lines. And so, the story of Captain Alden's act of kindness became legend, passed down through generations. Parents told it to their children at bedtime. Teachers shared it with their students, and historians wrote about it in books. But more importantly, it lived on in the hearts of those who had experienced it firsthand, proof that even the smallest acts of compassion could leave the greatest legacies. Years turned into decades, and the kingdom continued to thrive under the reforms inspired by Captain Alden's simple act of kindness. The schools that had once been few and far between were now scattered across every village, their walls echoing with the sounds of eager young minds learning, questioning, and dreaming. Farmers no longer struggled to transport their crops on broken roads. Merchants traveled safely along well-maintained paths, bringing prosperity to even the smallest communities. And while life was not without its challenges, there was a sense of unity and purpose that had not existed before. a legacy born from one man's decision to care. Alden himself grew older, his hair streaked with silver and his once shining armor replaced by simpler attire suited for an elder statesman. Though retired from active duty, he remained a beloved figure in the kingdom. Children who had grown up hearing stories of the kind-hearted guard would often visit him at his cottage near the edge of the capital. They brought gifts, handmade drawings, bouquets of wildflowers, or small trinkets, and listened intently as he shared tales of courage, compassion, and the importance of believing in others. One crisp autumn afternoon, long after the events at the village school, Alden received an unexpected visitor. It was Leo, now a grown man with a family of his own. He stood at Alden's doorstep, dressed in the uniform of a teacher, his eyes shining with gratitude. Behind him stood two young children, his son and daughter, clutching books tightly in their hands. "Captain Alden," Leo began, his voice thick with emotion, "I've come to thank you again. Because of you, I became a teacher. And because of you, my children will never know what it's like to sit on a cracked bench or share a single book among 10 students." Alden smiled warmly, inviting them inside. As they sat together by the fire, Leo recounted how Alden's actions had shaped his life. "You taught me that kindness isn't just something we feel, it's something we do. That day you brought those supplies changed everything for us. It gave us hope when we needed it most." The children listened wide-eyed as their father spoke, occasionally glancing at Alden with admiration. When Leo finished, his daughter shyly handed Alden a drawing she had made, a picture of a tall figure in armor standing beside a group of smiling children. At the bottom, written in careful letters, were the words, "Thank you for helping us dream." Tears welled up in Alden's eyes as he accepted the gift. For all the honors and titles he had earned throughout his life, nothing compared to this, the knowledge that his actions had touched lives in ways he could never have imagined. As the years passed, Alden's story became more than just a tale of generosity. It became a lesson etched into the fabric of the kingdom. Parents reminded their children that even the smallest acts of kindness could create ripples felt for generations. Teachers told their students about the guard who risked breaking rules to give them a better future. And leaders, including the king himself, often cited Alden's example when making decisions that prioritized the needs of the people over tradition or convenience. When Alden finally passed away at a ripe old age, the entire kingdom mourned. Flags flew at half-mast, and crowds gathered to pay their respects. But instead of sadness, there was a profound sense of gratitude, a celebration of a life lived with purpose and love. His tombstone bore only a few simple words, "Here lies a man who believed in the power of kindness." Long after his death, Alden's legacy endured. New schools were named in his honor, and statues of him were erected in town squares. Yet the true monument to his memory wasn't carved in stone or inked in history books. It was alive in the hearts of countless individuals whose lives he had touched. From the bustling cities to the quietest villages, people carried forward the spirit of compassion he had embodied, proving that kindness is indeed priceless. And so, the story of Captain Alden serves as a reminder to us all. In a world where so much seems uncertain, one act of kindness can light the way for generations to come.